There's a whisper down the line at 11:39, when the night mail's ready to depart, saying, "Skimble, where is Skimble? Has he gone to hunt the thimble? We must find him, or the train can't start." All the guards and all the porters and the station master's daughters, they are searching high and low, saying, "Skimble, where is Skimble? For unless he's very nimble, then the night mail just can't go." At 11:42, then the signal's nearly due, and the passengers are frantic to a man. Then Skimble will appear, and he'll saunter to the rear. He's been busy in the luggage van. He gives one flash of his glass-green eyes, and the signal goes all clear, and we're off at last for the northern part of the northern hemisphere. Panic spreads throughout New York City. The economic boom that had followed the end of the war has now come to a grinding halt. The stock exchange is closed, banks shutter their doors, and workers across the country are being laid off. When the dust settles, 1/7 of the workforce will be out of a job. However, this is not 1929, but 1873, the beginning of the first and lesser-known Great Depression. The crisis began in May of 1873, when the Viennese stock market crashed. The subsequent bank runs led to mass closures, and the panic soon spread to the rest of Europe. In September, it reached the United States, when the bank J. Cook & Company went belly up. In Britain, the 20 years of economic stagnation that followed became known as the Long Depression. One of the causes of the Depression was rampant speculation in the railroad industry, which was spurred on by the national unification of Germany in 1870 and the Union victory in the American Civil War in 1865, where political unification would be ratified by revolution in transportation and communication. The Depression brought an end to what Eric Hobsbawm has called the Age of Capital, a period of unprecedented economic growth that had begun in 1848, and one characterized by widespread acceptance of free trade policies. The new order that emerged after the Panic of '73 saw the rise of monopolies and trusts, who destroyed or absorbed their smaller competitors, all the while protected from international competition by protectionist tariffs. This led to a greater need for captive markets and cheap raw materials. The solution to that was colonialism. As the historian Neil Faulkner notes, colonial rivalries erupted in the Far East, Central Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Balkans. In 1876, only 10% of Africa was under European rule. By 1900, more than 90% of it had been colonized. To protect their newly acquired colonies, the great powers soon became locked in an arms race. The countdown to World War I had begun. The destabilizing effect of modernization, urbanization, and industrialization would inspire a variety of artistic movements that have come to be described by the umbrella term Modernism. As John Carey notes in his book, The Intellectuals and the Masses, the attitude of the modernists in relation to modernity itself was often pessimistic, and especially in the field of letters, many lamented the rise of mass readership, the direct result of public education reforms. In fact, it was not uncommon among the intellectual classes to have outright contempt for what they dubbed the masses. As Thomas Hardy wrote in 1887, "You may regard a throng of people as containing a certain small minority who have sensitive souls, these, and the aspects of these, being what is worth observing. So you divide them into the mentally unquickened, mechanical, soulless, and the living, throbbing, suffering, vital, in other words, into souls and machines, ether and clay." And in The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot, who opposed public education and believed that everything went downhill after Thomas Becket was martyred, drew association between the crowds of office workers swarming across London Bridge with the Massa Damnata of Dante's Inferno. A crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many I had not thought death had undone so many. This contempt for the masses led some to embrace eugenics, like W.B. Yeats, who insisted that the intellectuals would have to check the growth of the population. It will become the duty of the educated classes to seize and control one or more of these necessities. The drilled and docile masses may submit, but a prolonged civil war seems more likely, with the victory of the skillful riding their machines as did the feudal knights their armored horses. A diverse group of artists like the Romantics before them, the movement held one thing in common: a contempt for bourgeois values and culture. It was no accident that so many of these artists gravitated towards extreme political positions, be it fascism, like Pound and Dali, communism, Picasso and Dos Passos, or a reactionary conservatism, Eliot and Dos Passos again. The irony was that the Nazis condemned modernism as degenerate art, Stalin condemned it as bourgeois, and the McCarthyites of post-war America condemned it as communist. Modernism could never serve the totalitarian needs of a mass culture. They all have tired mouths and luminous, illimitable souls, and a longing, as if for sin, trembles at times through their dreams. They all resemble one another. In God's garden they are silent, like many, many intervals in his mighty melody. When they spread their wings, they awaken the winds that stir as though God with his far-reaching master hands turned the pages of the dark book of beginning. Those sent to the imperial periphery as managers of empire were confronted with ancient civilizations that had gotten along just fine on their own before the arrival of beneficent colonizers. Rudyard Kipling is a perfect example of this contradiction. An apologist of empire who penned The White Man's Burden, Kipling was born in India, and the first language he knew as a child was not English, but Hindi. In Mandalay, Kipling imagines a morose British soldier returning to London from the Far East, instead longing to return to Burma. Ship me somewheres east of Suez, where the best is like the worst, where there ain't no 10 commandments, and a man can raise a thirst. For the temple bells are a-callin', and it's there I would be, by the old Moulmein Pagoda, looking lazy at the sea. In Buddha at Kamakura, Kipling reflects on the image of the Kamakura Daibutsu in Japan, to draw an ironic contrast between Christian depictions of Christ at the Last Judgment and the gentle bronze image of Amitabha Buddha. O ye who tread the narrow way, by Tophet flare to Judgment Day, be gentle when the heathen pray, to Buddha at Kamakura. But when the morning prayer is prayed, think, ere ye pass to strife and trade, is God in human image made no nearer than Kamakura. Paul Cantor and Peter Hufnagel, in their article, The Empire of the Future, argue that the experience of empire also had a decentering effect on artists. This experience of decentering is also the fundamental experience of modernism, the unnerving realization that the conventions of European civilization have no solid foundation and traditional values may be hollow at the core. That is why the famous phrase, "things fall apart, the center cannot hold," can come from a modernist poem by Yeats, The Second Coming, and yet provide the title of a post-colonial novel by Chinua Achebe. We can see this effect in one of the most famous modernist paintings, Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, painted in 1907. What is striking is not just the disproportion of the female forms in the painting, but the fact that Picasso adorns 2 of the women with native African masks. The painting illustrates the influence of African and other native sculpture on the development of modernism and Cubism in particular. Picasso credited the inspiration of the painting to an ethnographic exhibition of African sculpture he saw at a Parisian Imperial Museum in 1907. By bringing works of art from the frontier to the metropolitan center, The museums of the imperial powers exposed European artists to new forms of creativity at a time when traditional 19th century realism was being challenged by photography and other forms of mass reproduction. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stone sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. It should be no surprise that modernism came to find its natural home in the United States of America. However, the Red Scare of the 1950s led to a depoliticization of art, and, in an ironic twist, modernism came to be upheld as the kind of art that could only be produced by a free and liberal society. Even the CIA, whose ranks were swelled by Ivy League recruits in the early days of the Cold War, found ways to funnel money into ventures that would promote abstract expressionism, much to the chagrin of artists like Jackson Pollock, whose emotionally charged drip paintings came to be promoted as purely formal abstract art. Despite the contempt for bourgeois democracy that defined many early modernists, the movement survived the McCarthy era by being adopted by America's liberal business community. The works of many modernists came to be enshrined in the syllabi of public universities across the nation. What would the first generation of modernists have made of Wallace Stevens, executive for the Hartford Accident and Indemnity Company, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1955? Call the roller of big cigars, the muscular one, and bid him whip in kitchen cups concupiscent curds. Let the wenches dawdle in such dress as they're used to wear, and let the boys bring flowers in last month's newspapers. Let B be finale of seam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. Take from the dresser of deal, lacking the 3 glass knobs, that sheet on which she embroidered fantails once, and spread it so as to cover her face. If her horny feet protrude, they come to show how cold she is, and dumb. Let the lamp affix its beam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream.